Hi, and welcome to Screams and Streams. This is a podcast that Mike and I started, and it looks into the best and worst horror movies as rated on Rotten Tomatoes from 1970 onwards. I'm Chad Campbell, and
I'm Mike Carron.
So Mike and I are colleagues, and we worked together for many years, and we both are really interested in horror movies, and we were talking about starting a podcast.
Yeah, we'd always been like, we should do a podcast, and always ended up going back to films all the time. So it just became natural that that's maybe where we should focus.
Right.
And yeah, sitting down, it's like, well, then what do we want to talk about?
So then we were looking at things that we wanted to talk about. Well, maybe we could talk about this. And then I remember saying, we should just do sketches, and we should do a movie, or we should write a screenplay. And then finally we focused on the podcast. We chose horror films. And then we were like, well, where do we start?
Yeah, we were like, well, we can't just talk about all horror movies. So we were like, how do we settle this in? How do we focus it? And we thought, we should do looking every year, the best and the worst of each year. And then it became, well, and then where do we start? Do we start this year and work backwards in time? And we kind of realized until 1970, horror as we understood it didn't quite exist as much, or it wasn't as prolific. So it would have been hard for us to find movies to do for every year. In
how we, I guess, define horror movies, right? So we looked at it, and we thought that it looked like it was starting to get scary around 1970. Mm-hmm. And so we thought, well, we'll just start there. And then we were discussing, well, do we just rate the best ones? How do we do this? And so for fun, we decided to do the best and the worst ones.
Right. Give ourselves a challenge on talking about the horrible horrors.
Right. And to see if we agreed with Rotten Tomatoes. And as you'll find, if you listen to the podcast, we sometimes agree and sometimes we don't agree. The top and the worst ones.
Yeah, and we had also even talked about that. Like, what do we use as our scale to go by for rating? Is it going to be IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes, Amazon, something else? And we just thought Rotten Tomatoes seems to be the more universal, not accepted, but it seems to be a more universal rating system. We liked the aggregate Metascore that they do. And also they have the audience score and the critic score. So then sometimes that led to interesting conversations on films.
So then we decided on how are we going to break down this podcast and categorize things. And so we came up with categories, and they are our first impressions, Tropes Hall of Shame, one-liners, what doesn't hold up, most gratuitous scene, stood the test of time, back it up moments, bonus features, and then we end off the podcast with some closing remarks.
And for each film, we also give it a rating out of 10 for a watchability scale. So as we're going through each episode, we're populating out the list, just sort of advising, is it worth checking out? 10 being absolutely, 1 being don't even bother.
I hope you enjoy what we came up with. And I'm Chad Campbell.
I'm Mike, and we'll see you next time with our 1970 feature.